Hello, welcome to Crashed, sort of. I'm Alex. Hello. You probably already knew that. If you're listening and it's Christmas Day or it's just after Christmas Day, then you hopefully already know who we are. We're not going to pick up loads of new audience in this episode, particularly as it's a clips episode of what we've been doing over the last 10 episodes. And just to sort of fill you in, Chris and I started this as a sort of test between end of October and Christmas to see if we could do podcasts, if it made any sense, if anyone would listen, if anyone would watch, if anyone would engage. And actually what we found is it's been really, really amazing the number of people who've talked to us about it, who've said, thank you for doing it, who've said it's good. And the few people who said it's terrible, we don't talk about that. And actually the number of people who sort of said, I tell my A-level students about it. I tell my people in college about it. There's people, old friends that have been in touch about it. And it's really, really sweet. Really, we're really grateful for you listening and watching and commenting and engaging and disagreeing and agreeing and all of those things. So we're really appreciative. So this isn't a real episode. It's real, but it's not real because it's Christmas Day. But because of just the madcap sort of 10 episodes that we've almost did as a pilot to see if we could make sense, I was sort of taking a look back, and if you're listening to this, it means that I have spent my Christmas Eve editing and putting it all together, which, that says a lot about me, I think, but hopefully you can enjoy it. And hopefully if you have listened to them all, it gives you a chance to look back. And if you haven't, firstly, welcome, but also it gives you a flavour of the sorts of stuff that Crash talks about, which is literally anything as long as it is loosely related to tech. And that is kind of everything now, which is why we set it up, particularly with a British lens, particularly with a sort of British eye on what's going on, particularly when Britain tries to work out what the hell its place in the world is, which is a long-winded way of saying, here is an episode of all of the things that we have loved or been intrigued by, all the fascinating conversations we've had over the course of the last 2 months. We'll be back in the new year with a new episode that was all about predictions. We've got so many brilliant people to give us predictions. It's so exciting about the sorts of random, beautiful light and shade that we have in that episode. So that'll be really exciting. But otherwise, Merry Festivus, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to any other religious ceremonies or non-religious ceremonies that you're celebrating. I hope you enjoy all of them, and we will see you in the new year. And welcome to Shay Omanijo, a PhD candidate in history at Harvard and an AI business founder who says she's helping keep people human in the AI-driven world.
Yeah, so the question is going to become, will people still be generating content using their own intellect and creative thinking skills? So, for example, if people are submitting materials to their publishers that is written using AI, which means using the same grammar, using the same sentence structure, using the same general ideas, then that's still poisoning the well, essentially. You're not contributing the vast, diversity of intelligence to these models. I think the B2B models that we're seeing right now, which is contracts between, for example, academic publishers, even newspapers, as you mentioned, and AI companies are not really trickling down to the authors or the people that are producing those contents. Like I just made a video about someone who wanted to submit an academic paper, which as an academic, I completely understand how much work goes into writing and researching those papers, but had to consent to having his work trained on by AI. I'm pretty sure he's not benefiting from the $44 million deal that Wiley made with these AI companies. So we really have to start thinking about how can individuals who want to opt in to having their work used, how can they benefit from it? And I think people like Matthew Price at Cloudflare is doing a really great job with this to make sure that if you are even scraping more content, how can we create a middleman to charge for that?
Yeah, and I guess that's really interesting. I wrote about the idea of AI poisoning for new scientists, and I thought that it was a really interesting idea. The idea that we're kind of deliberately either trapping AI crawlers into sort of a maze, or we're poisoning stuff. There's been some, I think it was, I can't remember exactly what the name of the model is, but basically poisoning AI image generators by having imperceptible things that mean they produce garbage, they produce cats out of dogs or whatever. Is there kind of a risk? Do you worry about the flip side of that, though, Shay, in terms of unfortunately, we are in this world where AI companies are doing this, much as we might feel difficult about it, but actually there is a problem here in that they are going to pollute stuff.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about AI, it's important to talk about more than just AI companies that are based in the US. So I don't want to perpetuate this like AI humanities antagonism, because there are great companies that are doing things to actually make my job, for example, as a historian, much easier. So there is a company based in Europe actually called Transcribus, which is building an LLM model based on historical writing. So that's easier for me to actually read materials and handwriting from the 19th century without like squinting my eyes or spending, 5 years working at a library in order to read them, right? So I think when people are thinking about the large amounts of undigitized data as training these models become cheaper and more affordable, I think more people will actually start looking at creating their own LLMs and their own bots to train on specific domain problems that we have. So I'm optimistic in the sense that there's a possibility where more and more people beyond just the big name AI companies, once again, I don't want to, pile on them too much, but to say that there is a real possibility where we could actually start solving real problems and not focus on like, TikTok, like duplicates.
So AGI, artificial general intelligence, you're right, has no, I spent too long on this morning trying to work out if there was an agreed definition of AGI, and you come to sort of Asimov's law, all of these sort of nonsense sci-fi things. But while the definition is not broadly agreed, what is broadly agreed is that AGI means a wide range of tasks are completed at or above an average human level, not tied to one particular skill set, and that knowledge can transfer between disciplines. It can learn autonomously and can demonstrate reasoning consistently without that reasoning just being parroted from a listicle in the way that LLMs traditionally have. I struggled with that because the thing that academics are struggling with at the moment is the common sense problem. So the experts talk about casual reasoning and just being able to take this logical step. But if we're using humans as a benchmark, we don't have common sense, right? We're creating this idealized pretend view of what intelligence is, transplanting that into a machine. So can a machine achieve AGI if it forgets the name of the person it's speaking to, if it misses the train, if it loses its keys, if it gets a simple math sum wrong? Because that's the human condition that we've somehow set this standard at, and I don't know why humans are the standard for what AGI is.
And that, I think, is in its own way tells us a lot about our hopes and our beliefs in what AGI should be, which is that we are holding it, actually, ironically, simultaneously holding it to a human standard by saying that it needs to replicate all of these human-like things, but holding it to a superhuman standard in that we expect it never to make mistakes. And what's fascinating about it is that there are, I think, there is a very fine line between AI not working in the way that we maybe want it to because it is just stupid, and AI not working the way we want it to because it is working almost like a human.
The political populism of Trump's America is likely to come to the UK, and some of its architects may well be involved. It's a political story with deep technological underpinning, so stick with us. It is very politics. But I was having a very off-the-record conversation with a couple of very well-connected people about whether Trump's electoral strategy could be repeated in the UK. The answer was that it is already happening, and some of the exact people involved in Trump's electoral successes are already talking to British politicians and influential names. I then had another conversation to stand it up, and they confirmed something was going on. It all stems from Project 2025, one of the hottest documents in US politics. It's a blueprint produced by the Heritage Foundation titled Mandate for Leadership, the Conservative Promise. It's a 900-page document, so go away and read it if you want. But in the simplest terms, it calls for centralizing control under the president, shrinking the administration, dismantling or repurposing government agencies, flattening tax structures, enforcing immigration policies aggressively, and appointing loyal political appointees to key civil service roles. It's a long piece of work, but you get the idea. It centralizes control, promotes traditional values at the expense of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and critics say weakens democratic institutions.
And what's particularly interesting about Project 2025, I suppose, is that Donald Trump spent the entire campaign in 2024 saying this thing did not exist, and now we've kind of gone Scooby-Doo mask off, and actually they're saying it does.
So around half the plan is either completed or in progress, according to the Project 2025 tracker. Around 70% of Trump's cabinet is tied to Project 2025 groups in some way, a DSMOG analysis found, and many of Trump's executive orders mirror, echo, or even repeat part of Project 25's language. So far, so politics, and this is a technology podcast. So the Trump administration has been using the flood the zone tactic. This is a strategy popularized by Steve Bannon, one of the architects of Trump's victory in 2016, and the CEO of his campaign, now a key figure on the right. It's a tactic to provide information overload, intentionally overwhelm the media and social network with torrents of stories, controversies, and statements, whether they be true, false, exaggerated, or whatever else, so no single one can stick. It means audiences are desensitized, journalists are left scrambling around to react rather than be given time to proactively research, and it means narrative control is maintained. This relies on 24/7 news agendas, tricky budget major corporations, and perhaps most importantly, social media. Just over half of Americans use social media as their primary news source, the most recent Reuters Digital News report found. So here's where the UK comes in. So the UK, according to the same Reuters study, it's around 20% of people use social media as a primary source. And the Steve Bannon mentioned earlier is increasingly linked to UK politics, primarily through Farage. So Bannon said Nigel Farage has done so much for British politics in January, and he hosted the Reform Leader on his podcast in July. So in that podcast, he talked about societal collapse. And then Farage said that if you were wearing a watch on the King's Road in London, which is one of the fanciest places in London, you may even be killed because people will want that watch. He also claimed you can shoplift up to £200 of goods in a grocery store and you will not face prosecution. So that statement relies on 2014 shoplifting regulations that were scrapped last year, although even before they were scrapped, it still allowed for prosecution and potentially a year in prison. So you can see whether flooding the zone is happening. So there's certain similarities between the UK and the US. So Farage interviewed Kevin D. Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, who wrote Project 25 Forward on his GB News show, and he spoke at a 2015 Heritage Foundation event. And this is where the whispers come in. I was having that conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I had it confirmed last week that there is a Project 2029 document being authored. So 2029 is when the next election is expected to be. It has to happen on or before August 2029, and that the right is coalescing around a route to make this doctrine a core part of UK policy. But here's where the playbook goes out the window. It looks increasingly likely that neither Labour leader and Prime Minister Keir Starmer nor the leader of the opposition, Conservative Kemi Badenoch, will lead their respective parties into the next general election. Why that's happening could be a whole podcast by itself. Technology, instant access news, social media, everything plays a big role, but that means that the door is open for British populism flooding the zone, deepfake chaos, and a few select members of the super wealthy and connected to potentially extend their influence. There are a couple of key names that I keep hearing time and time again: James Orr and Paul Marshall. James Orr is the UK chairman of the Edmund Burke Foundation, which runs NatCon, a right-wing political movement and conference. But perhaps most importantly, he is a good friend of US Vice President J.D. Vance, and like Vance, has close ties to the billionaire entrepreneur Peter Thiel. Orr is also behind the Centre for a Better Britain, a new think tank that both the Times and the FT have likened to Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation. We have invited Mr. Orr to speak to us. We have received no comment at this time. The second is Paul Marshall, the owner of GB News, Unheard and now The Spectator. He's an enthusiastic combatant in UK's own version of America's culture wars, according to the FT. And Mr. Marshall is an incredibly difficult person to track down, but we have asked him for comment as best we can. While he doesn't have direct links to Project 2025, he is a director of the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, which is ARC, which creates a similar conference to NatCon, which have both listed Nigel Farage as a speaker. Farage has appeared on stage with Trump. He has appeared on stage at NatCon and ARC conferences. He is seen as this sort of the British equivalent of Trump, and that is helping his policy. And there are more than a few references to certain things around migration and around the flooding the zone thing that Farage is already using. And I do believe that there are people definitely within the Conservative Party that I've been told, and potentially within the Labour Party, that I am not journalistically going to name because it's not stood up enough to be definitely true, where actually everyone is looking at Trump's playbook because Trump shouldn't have been elected. All odds are against him both in 2016 and in 2020. And it's that success that they're really chasing rather than necessarily the doctrine itself. Maeve Joy, a poet, creator, performer, advocate for sex worker rights, whose work documents queer communities and gender-expansive life. Second, Dr. Caroline Are is a person who wears many hats. They're an academic researcher, critic of platform safety models, who studies how moderation systems disproportionately affect women, queer people and sex workers. She's a pole dancer and a digital criminologist focusing on tech governance. Criminologist is really hard to say.
We noticed in our community before the age verification came in that lots of Instagram accounts were going down. And so I did an article for Polyestazine, and I was sort of researching and exploring whether it could be the fact that Instagram was scared about these hefty fines that they could be liable for if they're not protecting children online. And I'm sure it's influenced by that. It must be, right? But there's other websites like Substack. Someone was saying they can't read my article because it's age verified, but they're not censoring me. And on Instagram, we saw that 18 plus accounts came in, and that's great. And it's like, if you still have that differentiation, why do we get kicked off the app? But yeah, absolutely. I think the Online Safety Act is impacting how we exist on social media, but beyond myself as an artist and events producer, we're seeing it impact sex workers. On escort sites, sex workers aren't able to have any implied nudity or full nudity or even in lingerie. People are being forced face out. Usually people blur their faces because there are extreme consequences with being out as a sex worker, such as exclusion from family, exclusion from relationships, you can't enter the USA if you've been an in-person sex worker in the last 10 years. Or you can have your child taken off you if you do in-person sex work and even online sex work. So the Online Safety Act is essentially forcing sex workers to be face out because you can't have anything that shows off your body. And also you need that to like sell your services, which is crazy. So yeah, one case that I know of is that my friend usually she would advertise online and she couldn't get any clients, so she ended up soliciting in the street, which is something that should never happen. And the Online Safety Act is quite literally pushing people offline. Sorry to
That's such a deep sigh, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah. I mean, sorry, can I just add one thing? Like, I think, no one here debates that there are harms online and that children need to be protected and that there are horrible, horrible things happening. I think the issue is that, an internet that is safer for sex workers is a safer internet for everyone. And harm-focused approaches tend to view sex work as a harm and not as a job. So although I must say that having, done a lot of public consultations with Ofcom and engaged with them a lot, they do mean really well. They show up to events by and for sex workers. They do a lot of research and solicit a lot of research into this stuff. I think when the focus is harms, this does tend to happen. So I think we need to, yes, focus on harms, but also on accountability and redress.
what song do we want to create? It can't be serious. We can't have a serious song. What sort of genre?
What's the most embarrassing band that we can think of here?
I want to see a Steps revival.
Okay, let's do Steps then. Steps were genuinely brilliant.
Definitely containing the lyrics crashed in the chorus. Call the song Crashed about crashing in love with somebody.
You just press create anyway. We're not going to wait.
We have just pressed create. I realise that we're now on a podcast. It is created 2 songs called Crashed. We can open song page.
This was alarmingly quick. This was. There's no editing in this bit. This was literally like 3 seconds.
There we go.
Okay.
And we will be playing this song in the background we're going to listen to the whole thing.
My immediate reaction from the first 8 seconds is this is not like Steps.
It's 2025 Steps. It bangs. Key change.
So I think that it didn't understand what Steps is. I think because it mentions steps in the lyrics, right? And it's not that clever or knowing. Ian H. Watkins, I think, would be disappointed in this. However,
is that genuinely your feedback from me doing a terrible prompt and saying Steps? And in its metadata, it says pop, male and female vocals, alternating verses, dance pop, bright synths, infectious rhythm, group harmonies in the chorus. That's Steps.
I don't know. I haven't seen Steps on their reunion tours, so I am unsure if they have new music. But to me, I was expecting something more 90s.
And I'm going to just turn it into My Chemical Romance type emo ballad with real feeling behind it, powerful kicks, rock, Where is the rock button gone?
This is generative AI. It's constantly changing.
Soaring vocals, progressive rock, a punchy bass line, hard rock, ethereal strings. Let's see what happens with that. I mean, the album cover, to be honest, that slaps. The album cover is pretty great.
That's a 2010 Killers album cover. So this is a open-ended car which has some sort of neon heart over it and like a firework going on in the background, from what I can tell.
Well, it looks like the car has crashed. It goes in the title. There you go. You see, it's still loaded.
I'm waiting for the chorus to kick in fully.
Okay, this one has scared me.
This is what's interesting is this is a little bit like a Taylor Swift song sung by My Chemical Romance. It's got the country vibes though still. It's like it's hearing us.
I get the idea. I'm mid guitar solo, but I couldn't hear you over the guitar solo. So, Chris, George Osborne is the saviour of AI.
Also, breaking news, George Osborne has a new job, which is so revolutionary and so incredible that this is just such a newsworthy thing to talk about. Yeah, George Osborne having a new job.
We chose it. We chose to do it.
We did, because it is actually newsworthy when you move away from just George Osborne has a new job. I think the man is single-handedly trying to atone for the years of austerity by bumping up UK productivity figures and pushing down UK unemployment figures just by himself. But that is, of course, by the by. No, I mean, this is a significant thing, and I think it's a significant thing because of the way that you framed it, Alex, which is that this is yet another politician being tapped up by a big tech company. You mentioned Rishi Sunak. We, of course, are still living in the shadow of good friend of the show, Sir Nick Clegg. Please, Nick, do respond to our calls, our emails, our texts. We're getting a little bit desperate now. We would love to have you on the podcast. Of course, he sort of charted a path for everybody who followed in terms of going into these tech companies. And, you know, at the time it was kind of mocked, right? It was seen as this attempt to ride on the coattails of power. I think now the embracing of politicians by big tech companies is really significant, not least because of the thing that George Osborne is going to be overseeing, that OpenAI for Countries initiative, which basically is a very obvious attempt to try and bake in dependency at a government level for these AI tools, which means that you get a pretty good ongoing business from them. And you know, makes sense that you're trying to do this. What is interesting to me is how we should treat this and how we should treat the companies that hire these people. Because to me, at least, let me know your thoughts on this, Alex. Like, to me, tech companies are increasingly acting like political organizations. And I think that's a recognition of the fact that they sit astride many countries. And frankly, you know, we've talked in the past about the false equivalency of GDPs of countries versus market caps of organizations and their revenue figures. But they are as powerful, the leaders of these organizations, as world leaders now. And so to me, at least, we should start treating these tech companies as if they are governments. We should be more skeptical about them. We should be more willing to hold their feet to the fire than we already are. We shouldn't just accept what they say is given.
I don't think necessarily that's true anymore. I think they have the market cap of some major countries. I think that's true. But I think actually what all this is showing, that actually the innovation in this industry has hit a roadblock. So innovation is slowing, or at least the output of innovation is slowing. There is an increased cultural skepticism. I was talking to somebody the other day and they said the AI revolution is the one revolution that nobody wants. It's not the power to the people. It's not the sort of big movement of uprising of great, wonderful thing. It's this thing that appears to be everyone is accepting, but nobody really wants. And then you've got the beginning of regulation starting with the EU, and it means then that there is increased spending on lobbying and whispering and glad-handing, and that is not this big, innovative, beautiful, big AI firms turn into this wonderful, great future of hope and glory. It's just a case of how do we make sure we're the next Google and the next Apple rather than being the next Netscape, say that 3 times quickly, or AOL. So it's the space race, it's an arms race, it's a lobbying race. It is not that the companies are too powerful, it's that they have enough money to mean that they're not looked over. And in the same way as the Amazon factories have probably even now, but definitely 3 or 4 years ago, when they were offering to come into those communities and build them, those communities started to become skeptical. But before that point, they're like, oh my God, yes, we'll bring so many jobs into this community, not knowing until that point that Amazon with one hand giveth, the other hand taketh away.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting, the scale of this, and you touched on that there in terms of the money aspect. I mean, there was data relatively recently about the scale of EU lobbying. I think big tech companies spent something like 151 million euros last year on just lobbying in the EU alone, which, if you looked at kind of a like-for-like comparison, was the biggest 10 tech firms spending on lobbying in the EU outspent the combined value of the biggest 10, I think it was motor companies, oil firms, and pharma companies all combined. So spending power of those 10 companies greater than the 30, the biggest 10 in each of those sectors. What's interesting, and the reason why I'm so keen on this, and the reason why I was happy to talk about this was, having said that, yes, we big whoop that George Osborne has a new job. It's not really a story, but it is that I also wrote about it for The Guardian, so there'll be a piece going up probably between the time that we record this and going up tomorrow. And one of the notes that I got from my editor was, we should put it into that context. This is something that has been done before by prior industries, right? The idea that you have people who once worked in government going and working for instance, the arms industry or the tobacco industry or the pharma industry is not unusual. I just think that, at least for me, the stakes seem to be higher in this instance, and that is why I'm much more skeptical.
The stakes are higher in this than in the tobacco industry. That is a big claim.
Well, I'm a non-smoker, so I don't touch that sort of stuff, whereas I would suggest that an awful lot of people do use social media. And I think, again, you can talk about the pharma industry, everybody takes tablets and things like that, yes, but I do think that this is a more significant thing because it touches pretty much everybody aged, depending on whether you're in Australia or not, right? If you're in Australia, then it's 16 plus now. But if you are anywhere else in the world, then nominally it's 13 plus, but actually it ends up being much younger because you have, for instance, Roblox lobbying the European Union as well, and they have users who are incredibly young. So to me, I don't know, just the way that tech is layered into our lives, and very deeply so in every way, means that I think that this is kind of a higher stakes situation than perhaps, I don't know, pharma licensing regime, or, for instance, whether or not your tobacco has an extra 10 pence on it in terms of tax or not.
What on earth is a Roblox lobby? What are they lobbying for?
Well, weaker barriers, right, to these sorts of things. They're saying stay away from our loot boxes and our abilities to generate huge amounts of money off the back of kids. I mean, they do an awful lot of stuff, and we have to be, we are very journalistic. We haven't asked Roblox for comment on those sorts of things, we have to say. But, they would say, and they would be right in saying, that they do take the responsibility of their users very seriously. They do actually do an awful lot of work in terms of trying to protect those users, because they know that it's much higher stakes if things go wrong, because those users are young. But you also have to bear in mind that people do find ways around this sort of stuff.
Green technology was meant to eliminate the climate crisis, and with most of the British population agreeing that fixing the climate is important, it was going to be a vote-winning issue. Yet reform was made, scrapping net zero and climate policy a centrepiece. And wants to see a fossil fuel use increase. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch will repeal the Climate Change Act if she becomes Prime Minister, and former Labour MP Tony Blair's think tank is pushing for a U-turn and to reintroduce more fossil fuels. And this only came to my attention because the new populist leader of the Greens, Zach Polanski, has been heavily criticised for taking his party away from the climate and onto different issues. He said, we need to change everything, and actually it's all interconnected with the cost of living and equality. But actually, what I found is that we could have solved the energy crisis, and just no one's reporting in it, and it's still a political hotbed. So actually, offshore wind is half the price of gas, and the UK wholesale market is making energy cheaper than it ever has been. Chris, does this not hurt your mind?
Yeah, we're in an age of abundance and we don't realise it. And this is The interesting thing, we are at a point where, not necessarily in the UK, but elsewhere, solar is basically free now. You can pay for a solar panel, you can pay for yourself. And actually sometimes you have negative tariffs where you are basically given money in order to produce stuff to feed into the grid. California, Australia, a few countries have had similar moments happening there. And obviously we have this wind revolution, we have kind of elements of hydro that can help. Renewables are really, really good. Yet I think that there is still a concern around this, in large part because of the enormous energy needs that we are likely to see we're needing in the coming years because of the AI revolution. And this is the challenge, right? Is we haven't quite got our heads around the fact that we have renewable energy basically on tap now. We see this massive thing coming down the line going, we need to use an awful lot of energy in the very, very near future. We know that there is some connection between those two. I think we probably hope that AI will help us with that. But in order to do that, we need to spend a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And so we're going back to fossil in many instances, but not all, I suppose, right? Ed Miliband always hovers around this sort of thing and feels like he's coming on the horizon here.
So I was doing some digging around this because I pitched this to Chris yesterday, and then I sent him a message about 2 hours later saying, I'm sorry, that was absolute garbage. There is no evidence to support this at all. And then before you read it, I deleted it, so it never happened. And then I found out that actually I went deep into it and I figured out that it is part of reforms policy. And so much of it is politics. So where the politics and technology collide is in marginal pricing. Do you know have you come across marginal pricing before?
I used to work in the gas industry, but you might want to explain it in case people haven't worked in the gas industry.
I only came across it yesterday. So the most expensive generator needed to meet demand, so usually gas plant, sets the price for all power. So at the minute, around 60-70% of UK electricity comes from cheap renewables, but because the price is set on the most expensive bit of energy, which at the moment is gas, the price rises. So that happened in 2022, 2023, and is still an impact on prices now, which means that even the more efficient green technology becomes is irrelevant for as long as gas is used. And 85% of UK homes still use gas boilers. And there is all manner of political infrastructure and political will around if we can replace energy, make cleaner homes, make more energy efficient homes. That is actually the blocker. So the technology here is fascinating, whether that be fusion power or small modular reactors or green hydrogen or all of these things. It still comes down to gas prices and the import of gas, and whether or not we can find the sort of batteries that will keep electricity.
Yeah, and my gas nerd is now, inner gas nerd is coming back out. So I'm looking now at the price. So the national balancing point is our traded hub in the UK. It's the NBP, and that is our kind of UK price. It's around about 77 pence per therm at the minute, which is a very boring unit. I won't bother explaining it.
Oh, but no, what is a therm? No, you can't get it. What is a therm?
Okay, so gas
always show your workings, Chris.
Always show my workings. Damn it! Gas is measured in therms, which is so the UK is weirdly parochial. The UK measures it in pence per therm. Europe measures it in euros per megawatt hour, and the global trade market. So when you were talking about the importation of gas, large parts of that are through LNG nowadays, which is liquefied natural gas. You liquefy it, you put it onto a ship, you then move it. We're all about the tangents this week, it seems. We're now into the gas market.
How do you know everything about everything?
Well, yeah, right. I'm an encyclopedia.
Crashes and Everything Popular is Wrong production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. The title music is from Nuffer. Check them out on all of the streamers. We're hosted by Acast, assisted by Riverside Studios. We are published every Thursday morning. So get in touch to say how great we are, how terrible it is, if you just want to chat. I'm on Alex Huds. Chris is on @Stokel on X. If you want to support the podcast, go to crash.substack.com or search for Crashed Podcast on Substack in one breath. We will see you. Have a great Christmas, Happy New Year, all of those things.